Hey guys, Thomas the Silly Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to finally review Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, Marvel continues its journey into the third arc of their big adventures after the Thanos, even though this movie, preemptive spoiler alert, does take place before this event occurs. So anyways, uh, the father and the mother, Hank and I'll just call her Wasp for this review, are talking about how her mother and his wife are still alive. Meanwhile, Ant-Man is under arrest for his actions uh, in Russia, apparently, for fighting with the Avengers. Uh, so they sneak around. He sneaks around with his daughter, having some fun with her. Uh, and Lewis is there to help them out, have their little bit of fun. But his house arrest anklet thing breaks through the fence, and the FBI come to visit. And one of the agents talks about their heroes, what they're up to. Then it goes to him by himself, that being Ant-Man, having a 3-day montage of just messing around. Then he gets a sudden vision of Hank's wife. And shortly after, Hank calls, Ant-Man calls Hank. And then he gets knocked out, and then ends up in the car, riding with Wasp while being shrunk. So they reach this pretty empty area, only to discover that it's part of their little base, and they talk about this quantum realm, which they visited very briefly in the first movie, at the end of it. And they talk about the message that was planted in his head. And thus they are able to then leave and shrink the entire base, which makes the entire building later on sort of become an actual sort of MacGuffin, sort of the actual item that they need to become such a thing. Meanwhile, we just see the villain just standing there, Ghost, or the quote villain, I should say, Ghost just standing there. So Wasp talks to this black market salesman guy about this part that they need. And she puts on the costume when things look like they aren't gonna go anywhere, and she fights off these guys. And from out of nowhere, this ghost appears and tries to fight her, and Ant-Man joins the fray. But Ghost manages to get the lab, as it is now shrunk. And they get a little, they join Luis as, Ghost goes inside some cube thing with these lights that helps her, I guess, stay, like, in a physical form. They meet, meanwhile, Ant-Man and, I believe it was just Ant-Man at this point, meets, I'll just say his hero name, Goliath. But shortly after that, the FBI are on to Ant-Man, and then he manages to get out. So Ant-Man talks about how he had one of the previous suits, which would be able to locate their little base. So they go to the school, and he gets the old suit back, which is able to track the lab. So Ghost wakes up and then knocks them out. Her real name is Ada. I believe that was her name, but I'll just keep referring to her as Ghost. And the Goliath guy was with her all along, trying to help her out with her thing. Shows a little backstory about how her parents died, and how when they tried to rescue her, they kept phasing through her. So S.H.I.E.L.D. used her to train her and turn her into this weapon, essentially. So, Hank tricks them into taking out these big ants as they are captured in these chairs, and they are able to get out. Luis is outside waiting from there, and then the black market crew, the businessman, sees them, and well, that's going on. Ghost wants to use the little girl to try to also get the location, and Goliath isn't cool with that. But the business guy, the black market businessman, uses Lewis and a truth serum, and he does this little memory thing about telling him how he met Ant-Man and the whole story about the first movie, and pretty much catches us up to what is happening now. So, Ghost appears, and she somehow knew where Lewis, knew his location somehow. Meanwhile, Hank's wife takes over Ant-Man's body and tells them the information they need to find her, and then they get ready to leave. But Ant-Man says he can't help them as they are at the base and he needs to get back home. So he arrives back home just in time as the FBI surround him, and the FBI also surround Hank and Wasp. And then Ghost once again takes the base. So, while that's going on, Ant-Man has his daughter ask him about being Ant-Man and how long he was going back into it. And then Wasp gets... I believe they end up at the prison at this point, and then they attempt to get out. And with a little assist from Ant-Man and his little bark army, they're able to escape the little prison and use the ants as a new location tracker to find the base. And Lewis joins them once again. And while Ghost is trying to get into the quantum zone, the bugs interfere with her work, so she goes out and ready to attack. So Hank promises Goliath to find a cure for Ghost, but right before he goes into the quantum zone himself to find the wife, because they're already in the base at this point. So Ghost fights off Ant-Man, and as that's going on, Hank dives in, and Ant-Man manages to trick Ghost into thinking that the building was somewhere else, and yeah. So the black market guy and tries to give chase to Luis and the Wasp, and Ant-Man ends up joining them. And then Stanley makes his cameo for the evening of the movie, as this car chase is on suit. And Ghost as well joins this little chase. She takes the fight to them and takes the lab back as it was shrunken at some point again. They both try to fight off Ghost for a bit. And the market guy also is there, interfering, trying to get the lab. He gets the lab temporarily. Meanwhile, Hank makes it to this black void. And we cut back to Luis, who gets one of the remote little cars, and he's able to shrink it and grow it at his own leisure. Meanwhile, the black market guy avoids a giant Ant-Man as he is now grown in size. And he ends up going on this little yacht. And then Ant-Man uses once again his size to go in the water, but he manages to get the base. So we see that Hank runs out of time, and then has some sort of mind attack, is the only way I can explain it. And then he wakes up to a vision, and then he wakes up he snaps out of that, and he is now joined by his wife. So the FBI sees Ant-Man's on the television, now giant, and they head out to try and arrest him again. So Ant-Man falls underwater because being giant has its one weakness of him getting tired really fast. And apparently he was a size he wasn't before. He was even bigger than the last movie, apparently. So Luis goes to the lab, or goes for the lab, the mini lab, and is stopped by a ghost who makes the lab go big and gets inside of it. Meanwhile, Wasp and Ant-Man get back up, and then they kiss. They have their little love thing going on from the previous movie and this movie as well. But the black market guy comes, and Luis and his pals, who come out of nowhere with tasers, interfere. Anyways, we come back to Ghost, who thinks she knows the way. So, meanwhile, Wasp and Ant-Man come in just in time to fight Ghost off some more. And just as they are fighting, the ship that Hank took to get into that place gets out, and Ant-Man is able to save Wasp just in time as well. So the mother, or slash wife, touches Ghost and is able to heal her. I guess that's one of her powers, I don't know. But whatever. But Luis warns them that the police are about to arrive. So the market guys get the taste of the truth serum, and they tell about all the stuff they have done. Scott uses the suit. He makes it giant, but takes it off, so he's not in the suit, but he just lets it rest there while the FBI guy looks at it for a bit. And Bill, or Goliath, at this point, I'll just keep referring to him as that, I did this so far, remains with Ghost. So the FBI once again check on Ant-Man, and his house arrest ended on that day, so he is freed, and he is able to check in on his family. And Lewis's business finally gets to take off as well. So Hank and his wife get to, I guess, go out and place their little house somewhere in the middle of nowhere, it would appear. Meanwhile, Ant-Man, Wasp, and Ant-Man's daughter, and Wasp all enjoy a movie together, and that is the end of Ant-Man and Wasp. And the post-credit sequence, as I mentioned from the very beginning, we see three of them vanish due to Thanos's little trick in the end of the previous movie, while apparently Ant-Man was going to collect more stuff for Ghost, even though the wife just healed her, which, I don't know why that makes no sense to me, but whatever. I'd like to point out that Thanos' little snap only seems to have affected heroes. I want to point that out. I've been wanting to make a video about that, how it only seems to have affected heroes and no one else. And yes, I do include Hank and, of course, Wasp as heroes at this point. Hank being the prior Ant-Man and Wasp clearly being Wasp. And there was someone else, but I believe it was Goliath that vanished. I forgot. But yeah, that only seems to have affected heroes. I find that, yeah, so Thanos' little thing obviously didn't affect half of the population. I don't buy it for a second. But yeah, that was Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it was okay. They used the shrinking and growing thing to their advantage once again. Um, I find it a little odd that they never refer to her as a Wasp in the entire movie. It's a little odd. I think Ghost is an alright villain. Or, again, villain. Uh, More or less, it was more or less the black market guy that ended up being more of the obvious villain, and she was just trying to get her powers, or her powers under control, I should say. But she was willing to go the distance. She was willing to attempt to try to use Ant-Man's daughter, but never actually did. Um, they try to remain. There's some of their jokes in the previous movies, and I think it's a little, of a time waster. But it doesn't. I don't think it kills the movie per se. Um, Other than that, yeah, it was an enjoyable film. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it. Sure, yeah. And that's my review of Ant-Man and the Wasp. There you go. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out that link in the description. I'll head you over to my Patreon page, and any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.